On April 1st, 2471 BCE, the sun died over ancient Egypt, and when it came back, the pyramids stopped forever. This isn't a myth. This actually happened, and what I'm about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about why the pyramids suddenly ended. For over a century, Egypt's pharaohs built pyramid after pyramid after pyramid, each one trying to outdo the last, each one reaching higher toward the sun god Ra. Djedefre built a pyramid. Khafre, massive pyramid. Menkaure, another pyramid. Every single one of them put Ra in their name. They worshipped the sun. And then came Pharaoh Shepseskaf. Shepseskaf looked at this centuries-old tradition and said, nah. Instead of a pyramid, he built this, the Mastabat Pharaon, a giant rectangular box, no point, no reach toward the heavens. And here's the kicker, he didn't put Ra in his name either. For over 100 years, archaeologists have been scratching their heads. Why? Why would a pharaoh suddenly abandon everything his dynasty stood for? Was it money, political rebellion, a random whim? Wrong. In 2015, Italian astroastronomer Giulio Mogli calculated something terrifying. He ran the numbers on ancient astronomical data and discovered that on April 1st, 2471 BCE, right in the middle of Shepseskaf's reign, a total solar eclipse plunged Egypt into darkness. But not just any eclipse. This eclipse was perfectly positioned. The path of totality went directly over Budo, one of Egypt's most sacred cities. Memphis, the capital, over 95% totality. At 7:59 a.m. in the middle of the morning, the sun just vanished. Now picture this. You're an ancient Egyptian. Your entire religion revolves around Ra, the sun god. The pharaoh, he's literally Ra's son on earth. That's the whole deal. That's why they build pyramids to launch the pharaoh back to the sun when he dies. Every morning you watch the sunrise, proof that Ra is alive, proof that the pharaohs are divine. And then one morning, at sunrise, the sun starts dying. It gets darker and darker, the temperature drops, animals freak out, stars appear in the middle of the day. And your god-king pharaoh, he can't do anything about it. This wasn't just scary, this was an existential crisis. If the pharaoh is the son of Ra and Ra just disappeared, what does that mean? Did the gods abandon him? Did the pharaohs lose their power? Is the entire dynasty a lie? Here's where it gets even weirder. Mogli noticed something else about Shepseskaf's tomb. Every pyramid before it built so it could be seen from Heliopolis, the center of sun worship. The whole point was visibility from the sun god's sacred city. Shepseskaf's tomb, built where Heliopolis can't even see it. He literally turned his back on the sun cult. And that rectangular shape? That's not random either. It's designed to look like the ancient shrine at Budo. Remember Budo, the sacred city where the eclipse reached totality? Shepseskaf wasn't just abandoning the sun god, he was pivoting to older, pre-solar religious symbols. He was basically saying, the sun failed us, we're going back to the old gods. This was ancient Egypt's version of a complete religious reformation triggered by 7 minutes of darkness. Now, here's the crazy part. After Shepseskaf, the next dynasty, the 5th dynasty, went hard back into sun worship, like overcompensating hard. They built sun temples, they doubled down on Ra. They were basically trying to prove, no, the sun god is definitely still in charge, we promise. But the pyramids, they never reached the same heights again. The age of the Great Pyramids was over. One eclipse, 7 minutes. The entire course of ancient Egyptian architecture changed forever. Now, full transparency, not every historian is convinced. Some argue the dates don't line up perfectly depending on which chronology you use. Others point out that eclipses happened before without stopping pyramids. Maybe it was economics, maybe it was politics, maybe Shepseskaf was just a contrarian. But here's what we know for sure. Something made him completely abandon centuries of tradition, and a total solar eclipse right over Egypt's most sacred sites? That's one hell of a coincidence. So, the next time someone tells you ancient Egypt was all about stability and unchanging tradition, remember April 1st, 2471 BCE. Remember the day the sun died and took the pyramids with it. If you want more mysteries about ancient civilizations that'll blow your mind, smash that subscribe button. Drop a comment. Do you think the eclipse really caused this, or is Mowgli reading too much into it? I'll see you in the next one.
The Great Pyramid of Giza. For thousands of years, it's just been there, a silent giant in the desert. We all know the standard story, right? It was a tomb for a pharaoh. But what if that's not the whole story? Not even close. What if, locked inside those stone corridors, there's a message, a prophecy, written for our time? Well, let's dive into one of the most wild and fascinating theories ever put forward about this ancient wonder. You know, to even begin to wrap your head around this theory, you first have to appreciate just how impossible the Great Pyramid really is. And it's not just us saying that. Even the experts, guys like the renowned Egyptologist Sir Flinders Petrie, were completely floored. He called the precision marvelous and the building methods almost inconceivable. We're talking about blocks that weigh tons, fitted together so perfectly you can't even slip a piece of paper between them. Over 13 acres. So you have to ask, was all that superhuman effort really just for a tomb?
And that is the central question we're tackling today. Is it just the world's most epic tombstone, or could it be something more? For this explainer, we're going to journey back to the 1940s and unpack a seriously radical theory that claims the pyramid is nothing less than a monumental, stone-carved prophecy of the entire Christian story.
Okay, so before we can decode this supposed message, we have to get a real feel for the scale of the mystery itself. This isn't just about how they built it, but why they built it with such insane mathematical and astronomical precision. It's that huge question mark hanging over it that really opens the door for these kinds of alternative theories to pop up.
And that brings us right to the heart of this idea. According to our source material, a book from 1943 called The Great Pyramid, Its Christian Message, the pyramid's dimensions aren't random at all, not one bit. They're a deliberate, divinely inspired code. Every single passage, every chamber, every angle, it's all a piece of one massive puzzle.
The author, a man named Adam Rutherford, actually gave this field of study a name, Pyramidology. Now, what's really amazing about this is just how ambitious he was. I mean, look at his definition. He saw this as the ultimate unifier, the one thing that could finally bring science and faith together, and once everyone understood it, would make all other religions and scientific theories just disappear. So yeah, no small claims here.
So you might be wondering, how in the world do you unlock a code like that? Well, Rutherford claimed he'd found the key. He called it the pyramid inch. He was convinced it was the original, true unit of measurement. And get this, he pointed out that it was astonishingly close to the modern British inch. We're talking a difference of only 1/1000th of an inch. To him, there is no way that could be a coincidence. So this theory then takes three fundamental constants and weaves them together. First, you have pi, which you can find all over the pyramid's geometry, that represents the divine creator. Then you have the solar year, which is also encoded in its dimensions, and that signifies the message is all about us, about human history here on Earth. And finally, you have the inch. The inch is seen as the messenger, which, and this is where it gets pretty controversial, led Rutherford to believe that the message was specifically intended for the British and Anglo-Saxon people.
And this right here is the absolute master key, the crucial piece of the code that changes everything. It turns the pyramid from just a static building into a dynamic story. The scale couldn't be simpler. 1 pyramid inch equals 1 year of time. And once you have that key, the pyramid's architecture suddenly becomes a book that you can read.
Okay, so let's see how this actually works. Using this inch-to-year scale, Rutherford proceeds to map out the entire history of humanity, at least as it's told in the Bible, directly onto the pyramid's internal passageways. It's literally a timeline in stone.
The method is actually pretty straightforward. You start at the entrance, and that marks your starting date. Then you just move through the passages, and for every inch you travel, 1 year goes by. The different passages symbolize different eras in God's plan, and the big chambers they lead into, well, those represent the final outcomes for each of those ages.
And this is where it gets really mind-blowing. When you actually apply that scale, Rutherford found that major architectural points lined up perfectly with huge biblical events. The entrance, that corresponds to the pyramid's construction around 2623 BC. The beginning of the first ascending passage, that marks 1453 BC, the year of the Exodus from Egypt. The start of that magnificent Grand Gallery, AD 33, the year of the crucifixion. And where does that huge gallery end? 1914, which he said marked the beginning of a great time of trouble.
But the timeline wasn't enough. Oh no. The claims get even more specific, even more precise. The theory says that the exact angle of the main ascending passage, 26 degrees, 18 minutes, 9.7 seconds, is what Rutherford called the Christ angle. Why? Because if you were to draw a line from the pyramid at that exact angle, he claims it points directly to Bethlehem.
But this prophecy doesn't just stay in the ancient past. According to this interpretation, the pyramid also has a lot to say about the destiny of modern nations, especially as things were shaping up in the 20th century and beyond.
Now here's where it connects to the modern world in a pretty shocking way. Just take a look at the Great Seal of the United States. You know, it's on the back of every dollar bill. What do you see? An unfinished pyramid, a lot like the Great Pyramid, which also doesn't have its capstone. And underneath it, that motto, Novus Ordo Seclorum. It means a new order of the ages.
For Rutherford, this was like a smoking gun. You could almost hear him saying, "Come on, people, how is this not obvious?" He saw it as undeniable proof. The world's rising superpower literally adopted the symbol of the pyramid and a motto proclaiming a new order of ages, the very thing he believed the pyramid had been prophesying for millennia.
So the big question is, who is supposed to lead this new order? The theory is very specific about that. It identifies three nations. Great Britain is the kernel, or the core. The United States is its powerful partner. And then here's a bit of a curveball. Iceland. Through his own pretty complex biblical interpretations, Rutherford identified Iceland as the modern-day successor to the biblical tribe of Benjamin.
So what's the ultimate goal here? What's the point of this incredibly elaborate timeline built into a giant stone monument? Well, according to the theory, the pyramid's entire message was designed for a scientific age, a time when humanity would need cold, hard, empirical proof before it would believe in a divine plan. And you can tell from this quote, Rutherford really truly believed he had cracked the code. He didn't think he was revealing some obscure mystical secret. He felt the pyramid's message was simple, beautiful, and totally straightforward. A truth so clear that anybody, learned or not, could finally see that God's word and God's world were one and the same. And so, we get to the grand finale of the prophecy. It's all leading to this, the prediction of a complete and total transformation of the world. The period of chaos that kicked off in 1914, that was just seen as the painful birth pangs of a new age, leading to the establishment of a divine new order right here on Earth. An order that Rutherford predicted would be fully in place by the end of the 20th century. You know, Rutherford's theory is a fascinating thing. It's a grand, all-encompassing system built from inches and angles and faith. And while history may not have unfolded exactly as he predicted, it does leave us with a much bigger question. Whether we're talking about the Great Pyramid or Stonehenge or the Nazca Lines, what is it about these ancient mysteries that makes us search so desperately for patterns, for codes, for a message from something bigger than ourselves? For 4,500 years, there's been this one single structure sitting out on the Giza Plateau, just silently challenging everything we think we know about the ancient world, the Great Pyramid. It's not just some old tomb. It's one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. And today, we're going to dive into some of the wildest theories about how it was actually built.
I mean, just try to wrap your head around this. This thing was the tallest man-made structure on Earth for almost 4,000 years. Its base, which covers 13 acres, is so perfectly level it's off by less than an inch, and its sides are aligned to true north with a precision that would make modern engineers jealous. This wasn't just building something, this is a feat of engineering that honestly still baffles us today.
And it was built with this many stone blocks, that is 2.3 million of them.
Most of these weigh around 2.5 tons, which, is about the same as a big SUV. But some of the granite blocks, the ones deep inside, they weigh up to 80 tons. That's like trying to lift a Boeing 737.
So, yeah, that brings us to the big one, the ultimate question. In a time before steel, before even the wheel was widely used for this kind of thing, before any modern machinery, how on earth did they pull this off? It's the question that's haunted historians and engineers for centuries.
Okay, so the official story, right? The one we all learned in school, is the carve and hoist theory. The idea is that the Egyptians just quarried millions of blocks, shaped them with basic tools, and then dragged them up these massive ramps. It sounds simple enough, but the more you look at it, the more questions pop up.
Let's just break down how hard this would be. First, their tools were mostly copper. Trying to cut granite with copper chisels with this kind of precision, it's a real stretch. Then there's the job of lifting 80-ton blocks hundreds of feet in the air. But maybe the most mind-blowing part is the outer casing stones. They were fitted so perfectly you can't even slip a piece of paper between them. And to do all of that in just 20 years, it just seems almost impossible.
So, because the standard theory has all these holes, it's opened the door to some much more radical ideas. What if the Great Pyramid wasn't a tomb at all? What if its real purpose was something we're just now starting to even think about? What if it was a machine?
Some of these more out-there theories connect the pyramid to ancient myths, like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods. The thinking is that these old stories might actually be a kind of faded memory of a lost technology. Proponents say the pyramid was a source of massive power, something the Egyptians apparently called iket, which means glorious light. A power so great you could only really describe it as divine.
So what kind of fire could we be talking about? Well, one theory points to these little things, neutrinos. They're these tiny, almost weightless particles that the sun is constantly blasting in all directions. Billions of them are flying through your body this very second, and they almost never interact with anything, which is why we call them ghost particles. But what if you could force them to? This is the neutrino reactor theory. It suggests that the pyramid is basically a giant machine built to capture energy from the sun. The idea is that its super precise geometry and the specific materials it's made of could somehow tune matter, making it more likely for neutrinos to slam into atomic nuclei. If that happened, it would release a burst of energy. And if you could do that on a massive scale, well, you'd have a source of pretty much limitless, clean power.
Okay, so a pyramid power plant is a huge claim. And you know the saying, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So how do we sort through this? How do we tell the difference between a potentially groundbreaking new idea and what a lot of academics would call pseudo-archeology? It really all comes down to your method.
The scientific method is all about following the evidence wherever it leads. You start with a question, you test your idea, and you have to accept the conclusion, even if it's not what you wanted. Pseudo-archeology, on the other hand, kind of works backwards. It starts with the answer, like the pyramid was a power plant, and then goes looking for any little piece of evidence that seems to fit, while ignoring all the stuff that doesn't.
So if we apply some of that scientific skepticism to the power plant theory, some pretty tough questions come up. Like, if it was making power, where's all the machinery? The turbines, the control rooms, the power lines? Also, generating power creates a ton of heat, which makes things expand. But we know the pyramid's limestone casing actually cracked and fell off over time, which suggests it wasn't built to handle heat at all. That would be a fatal flaw for a power plant. And maybe the biggest question of all, why is there absolutely zero mention of this incredible technology in any of the thousands of Egyptian texts we've found?
The power plant theory, it's a fascinating idea for sure, but there's just no physical evidence to back it up. So, what if the real answer isn't about some lost, super advanced technology? What if the evidence has been hiding in plain sight, in the very stones of the pyramid, this whole time?
So a team of material scientists decided to ask that exact question. They stopped looking at the big picture and started zooming in, way in. They put samples from the pyramid under an electron microscope, and what they found could honestly rewrite the entire story. So take a look at the seam between these two casing stones. See how they fit perfectly, even though the line itself isn't perfectly straight? Trying to carve two massive stones to fit like that would be unbelievably difficult. But what if they weren't carved? What if they were cast in place, just like we pour concrete today? This theory suggests the Egyptians developed a kind of ancient concrete and just poured it into molds right there on site. And under a scanning electron microscope, the casing stones show something surprising.
You see, natural limestone has these neat, orderly layers. But this stuff, it's a jumbled mess of crystals. This is exactly what you'd expect to see in a material that was mixed together and then hardened quickly, a lot like modern concrete.
But here's the real kicker, the chemical analysis. The yellow you see here is calcium, which is what limestone is mostly made of. But look at all that red. That's silicon, and it's acting as a binder, basically a glue, holding the limestone particles together. You just don't find this specific silicon-based binder in any of the local quarries, which is really strong evidence that at least some of these blocks were man-made.
So, where does all this leave us? We've got 3 totally different explanations for one of the greatest wonders of the world. It's like each theory is looking at the same object, but through a completely different lens.
All right, let's just quickly recap. You've got the classic carve and hoist theory. It's simple, but it just can't explain the insane precision and scale. Then you have the neutrino reactor theory, super cool, high-tech, but there's zero physical evidence of any power equipment. And finally, the cast concrete theory. This one solves the problem of how they got that perfect fit, and it's actually backed up by some pretty compelling scientific evidence.
So, what is the Great Pyramid? A pharaoh's tomb built with sheer brute force? A lost power station from a forgotten civilization? Or a masterpiece of ancient chemistry? Maybe the real answer is some combination we haven't even thought of yet. For now, the mystery continues.
You know, the Great Pyramid is more than just an old puzzle. It's really a mirror for our own search for answers. It reminds us that while it's fun to dream up these incredible theories about lost technology or visitors from the stars, sometimes the most profound, the most radical answers are found by just looking a little bit closer at the world that's right in front of us.
Okay, so today we're diving into something that looks, well, pretty simple at first. It's an ancient ostrich egg. But what's carved onto it? That's a whole other story. It's a drawing that might just flip the script on everything we thought we knew about one of the most famous wonders of the world. And that really brings us to the big question, right? Can a 7,000-year-old ostrich egg actually rewrite history? Because what we're talking about here is an artifact found in a tomb from way back around 5000 BCE that seems to show something our history books are very clear shouldn't exist for another 2,500 years. You can imagine this has kicked up a huge debate, especially online, and in those corners of the internet that love a good historical mystery. Are these markings just, simple decorations, which is what most historians would say? Or do they reveal something else? A secret history that we've completely missed? All right, to really get what all the fuss is about, we need to wrap our heads around the massive timing problem this egg creates. It's a big one. So, here's the deal. The egg was found in a tomb from what we call the Naqada culture, way before the pharaohs. And on it, you've got these etchings. The ones causing all the trouble are 3 triangles. And they're not just simple triangles. They have these horizontal lines running across them. And they're sitting right next to a wavy line that looks an awful lot like a river, maybe the Nile? And this right here, this timeline, this lays out the paradox perfectly. You've got the egg on one side, dated to around 5000 BCE. But the Great Pyramids of Giza, the ones we all know, they weren't built until about 2500 BCE by pharaohs like Khufu. That's a 2,500-year gap. We're not talking about a small mix-up here. This is a massive historical canyon. So how do we even start to unpack this? We have to ask the right questions. Like, what was even happening in Egypt all those thousands of years before the pyramids? Was it just an empty desert? Were the people there just, primitive? Or was there something more going on? Let's dig into the evidence. Yeah, you really have to forget everything you might picture about Egypt before the pyramids. Because when you look at the actual archaeology, it tells a story of a world that was surprisingly complex, super dynamic, a place that was already building the foundations for the pharaohs. Just take a look at this map. The Nile was anything but empty. Long before the first pharaohs united Egypt, this whole region was buzzing with settlements and cultural hotspots. You can see some of the big ones here, especially in Upper Egypt, places like Naqada, Hierakonpolis, and Abydos. And it's so important to understand who these people actually were. We call them the Nakata culture, named after a key site where a ton of artifacts were found. And listen, this wasn't just some scattered group of tribes. No way. This was a complex, sophisticated society that was thriving for more than 1,000 years, right around the time this egg was made. They were literally setting the stage for everything we associate with ancient Egypt. So, what could these people actually do? When you start looking at what they accomplished, it completely changes the game. It redefines what we thought was even possible back then. Let's just break it down. First off, they were building pretty advanced towns. Places like Hierakonpolis had these massive ceremonial centers. Second, they were incredible craftsmen. They made this beautiful pottery, intricate stone vessels, amazing tools. And third, you start to see a powerful elite class taking shape. Rulers with enough clout to trade for goods from far away and build the very first royal cemetery at Abydos. And you don't have to take my word for it, just look at these artifacts. On the left, you've got copper harpoons. That's not just a tool, that's a status symbol. It says you're powerful enough to hunt hippos. And on the right, that stunning black-topped pottery. That's their signature style, and it shows off some serious artistic and technical skill. And then there's this. This is Tomb UJ at Abydos. It's one of the most incredible finds from this whole period. It was built around 3250 BCE, and it's this complex, multi-room tomb made of mud brick. This is proof positive that the Nakata elite were already building amazing architectural structures for their burials. It's the beginning of a tradition that would eventually lead to, you guessed it, the pyramids. Okay, so now that we know all this, now that we know the Nakata people weren't primitive at all, that they were skilled artists and builders, let's go back and look at that egg again. Does this new context make the pyramid theory more plausible or less? So circling back to the egg, the whole argument that these are pyramids really hangs on a few key details. The shape of the triangles is very geometric, very precise, and those horizontal lines, well, they don't really look like the natural shape of a mountain, do they? The people who believe this theory say those are intentional details, meant to show blocks of stone. But okay, what did other art from this time actually look like? This here is a piece of painted cloth from Hierakonpolis, from about 3500 BCE. You can see it's got a mix of things: boats, animals, people, lots of geometric symbols. The style is really symbolic, kind of abstract. So the question is, does the art on the egg fit in with this style, or is it something totally different? It's really fascinating when you put them side by side. And you know, this egg isn't alone. It's not the only ancient artifact caught up in a debate about its age. The Great Sphinx is another huge one. Mainstream history says it was built by the pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BCE. But then you have geologists like Robert Schoch who look at the heavy water erosion on it and say, no way. He argues it had to have been carved thousands of years earlier, back when Egypt had a much wetter, rainier climate. It's these kinds of puzzles, the egg, the Sphinx, that really force us to think bigger. And all of this kind of leads to a bigger question, doesn't it? Why are we so drawn to these mysteries? What is it about them that just grabs us? And what does that say about how we look at our own history? When you boil it all down, it's about this tension. On one side, you have the hard archaeological record, the stuff we can actually dig up, hold, and study. But on the other side, you have all these gaps, the pieces of the puzzle that are just gone, lost to time. And it's in those empty spaces where imagination, speculation, and all these great mysteries really start to grow. And for a lot of people, this isn't just a fun what-if game. The egg really captures that feeling. It's this sense that maybe the official story we've been told is missing something, or worse, maybe it's been deliberately covered up. It's this deep desire to find a lost truth that's been hidden from us. But here's the bottom line, and it's so important. Whether those are mountains or pyramids on that egg, it doesn't change one crucial fact. The people who made it were not primitive. The Nakata culture was an absolute powerhouse of art, technology, and social organization. They laid the groundwork for the pharaohs and the pyramids over thousands of years in a world that was already ancient and incredibly complex all on its own. So that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. As we try to piece together the past, especially when we hit these big gaps in the evidence, what's more important to us? Is it the hard evidence, the artifacts that give us a solid but incomplete picture? Or is it the amazing mysteries that fire up our imagination and make us wonder, what if?